Welcome to the Cashflow Project podcast. Are you looking to better your financial situation by increasing your cash flow? Too busy to hunt for real estate deals or don't know where to start? Then you're in the right spot. Join us as we dive in and talk about investing for cash flow using multifamily real estate.
Welcome to the Cashflow Project. I'm your host, Duke Ong with Tri-City Equity Group. With me is my co-host, Vince Gettings.
Hey Duke, how's it going?
Great, how are you?
Great. I'm excited for this video here. We're going to be going over another video of our educational series. This one we're going to be talking about how to screen sponsors as a limited partner, as an equity partner. So without wasting anybody's time, let's get right into it. So first, let's just knock out some of the terminology, some of the jargon that you hear thrown around when we're talking about syndications. So when somebody says a GP, that's general partnership, that's the sponsorship team, that's the operators, that all of those are synonyms. They're all the same thing. You know, if you're a sponsor, if you're a GP, if you're an operator, you're part of that managing entity that's managing the property, managing those day-to-day activities, putting the deal together. If you hear things like LP, equity partner, silent partner, those are all synonyms as well of the people who just put up the money. They're investors in the deal, they're equity partners, but they don't actually have any day-to-day responsibilities. They have some voting rights, but normally they don't really do anything other than put up the equity of the deal, and they're normally not guaranteeing the loan either. So just the jargon that a lot of people throw around there, they're all interchangeable, all those terms. So Duke, going right into it, give us a brief overview of kind of what a deal sponsor is.
So a deal sponsor is the party responsible for acquiring, managing, and disposing of the asset. And it's also known as a general partnership or GP, or the management team. So when you're vetting sponsors, track record is important. You want to ask sponsor for past investment performance, but take that with a grain of salt because past performance does not guarantee future success. Look for transparency in communication, but don't get distracted by flashy marketing or design because those aren't directly tied to the actual operations, which is the most important aspect of the deal. It's the day-to-day management of the asset. So you want to be sure that you're thorough in your due diligence.
Exactly. And as you said, the management of the asset and their experience, we know that sponsors normally don't work alone. So on their sponsorship team, what should you be looking for as far as who is on the sponsorship team and what kind of experience they have?
Well, when you evaluate the experience of the sponsorship team, make sure that their experience aligns with the property and the business plan. For example, a team with A-class experience might not be well suited to execute a C-class reposition. You want to also inquire about the team's advisors, as that can be influential in their ability to execute the business plan. And sometimes intuition and gut feelings of trust can be good in this case because it's going to be a long-term relationship. Typically 3 to 7 years. So you should kind of test out the sponsor by maybe investing the minimum just to see kind of how it goes before do more deals with them.
Exactly. So sponsorship teams, there's usually one or two main people that are steering the ship, and then they have a extended team that could be 1, 2, 3, 4 different people on their extended sponsorship team. Each one of those people should have a substantial role and skill that they're bringing to the deal. Maybe somebody is a deal finder. That's their one job is they go out, they work with all the brokers, they source deals, they do the driving for dollars, they have all the skip tracers under them. But that's their one role and that's what they bring to the table on the GP is they find the deal. Then you can have another person that's the operations, like the COO, where they run all the operations. They are very experienced in building teams, running operations, building systems and plans. And that's their one role. And then you might have somebody else that does investor relations or the person that builds the investor CRM, does all the follow-up meetings, the calls, keeps tracks, making sure everybody's interests are aligned, nobody's falling through the cracks, and the investor base is well taken care of, and they're staying well informed and building the strong lines of transparency and communication, and that's their role. And you might have somebody else that's when you get into bigger deals like a KP, where it's a balance sheet investor, so to speak. They're putting up their balance sheet and they guaranteeing on the loan, and that's their role. So as an LP, as a potential investor, you want to see what role each person on the sponsorship team is doing and what experience they have in that role to make sure that they have the experience and they're aligned with you and your goals. But we also know a sponsorship team doesn't work in a vacuum either. There's always an extended team. So outside of the sponsorship team, as far as third-party team members, what should I be looking for?
Well, the sponsor relies on several third-party team members. Probably the most important of these is the property manager, who is responsible for executing the business plan on a day-to-day level, as laid out by the sponsor. So you want to do thorough due diligence on the property manager because this can make or break the deal. Another key team member is contractors, because the scope of work will be dependent on their ability to execute the interior renovations and any exterior curb appeal renovations. Sometimes property managers handle this in-house, so that could be folded into the property manager due diligence. Another key team member is the attorney, and you want to make sure that the attorney specializes in syndications. So an SEC attorney that specifically works in syndications is key, because they'll be responsible for drafting all the legal documents, such as the operating agreement, subscription agreement, and private placement memorandum. And the last key team member is the lender, who will be responsible for procuring the funds needed to close the deal. And they'll be driving a lot of the underwriting constraints that the sponsor will have to play with. And it's not always necessary to do diligence on every single team member, but knowing who they are at least and knowing their track record can be helpful.
Yes, and it could be as easy as just getting their names and doing a quick internet search. A lot of these companies, these third-party companies, are going to have their own websites. A property manager, especially in the size of property manager you're going to be doing for a syndication, they probably have a website where you can go and you want to make sure, does this property manager have experience with, for instance, apartment buildings? If they're primarily a residential single-family property manager, they might not be equipped to handle, like we mentioned earlier, C-class reposition. So you want to make sure that the property manager is aligned with the sponsorship team and the investors, as well as they have the experience to handle whatever that business plan the sponsorship team is trying to execute. So I thought that was a very good point there. And then I said that you don't need to go in depth, but at least find out who they are, do some searching on them. If something piques your interest, bring it up. The sponsorship team should have no problem talking, to whatever your concerns are very, very quickly. So we know that real estate in general is a very much a team sport, and referrals and word of mouth referrals are pretty much the lifeblood of this industry. So how important is referrals for limited partners and when looking for sponsorship teams?
Yeah, so referrals are definitely important. It's an excellent way to connect with potential operators that are trustworthy. So once you kind of build trust with the sponsor over time, this becomes easier and faster to do. So you don't have to go through the same due diligence every time. But it's probably not advisable just to do a Google search for syndicators. It's probably better to get referrals or word of mouth, because then at least it has some level of vetting through your connection.
Exactly. You definitely want to get somebody that has been a past investor. For me, it'd be somebody that has been a past investor or that is a current investor, and speaking with them as candidly as possible about that team. That'd be the best referral I can get. What about the sponsorship communication style? What should we expect? Like, what's in a acceptable expectation for a sponsorship team for dealing with limited partners?
Well, there's some questions that you might want to consider when looking at the communication and their responsiveness. So one is, how long does the sponsor take to get back to you, if at all? Another is, are their answers transparent and clear? Does it make sense to you? Do you know what they're talking about? And can they answer most of your questions about the deal? So you want to kind of like read between the lines and kind of see how they answer the questions, not just the actual content of the questions themselves.
Exactly. And then also, once you're in the deal, you want to ask, how often should I be getting communication from the sponsorship team about the deal? Is it going to be once a month, once a quarter, every end of year? I'll get a report. Like, what kind of ongoing communication and deliverables will I get from the sponsorship team regarding the performance of the property and status of the reposition and the execution of the business plan? That'd be something I want to know up front, to see how responsive they're being, and how transparent they're being, and how in the loop they're keeping their investors. So doing due diligence on a sponsor is just as important as a sponsor doing due diligence on a deal. What are some specific questions that a potential investor should be asking of a sponsorship team?
All right. So first is ask them to send you the OM, or the operating memorandum, the T12, the trailing 12 profit and loss statement, and the rent roll. What properties do they own, and how are they performing? How much is the general partnership contributing to the deal? Usually you want to look at least 10% of the raise that the GP is contributing, because it shows they have skin in the game. You have non-stabilized properties. When will they become stabilized? If you had a property fail, what did you learn, and how could you avoid that moving forward? And have you had any cash calls, and why? So cash calls are when the general partnership comes back to the limited partners and asks for more capital in order to solve a short-term cash crunch. So that's generally a bad thing. You don't want to have that happen. So that can be avoided through proper planning. Another question is, if you have been voted out as a lead, please explain. Were to be voted out of this deal, what percentage is required to do that? And those are usually spelled out in the legal docs. If you have resigned as a lead, why? Did you use third parties for due diligence? And what is the plan for property management? Can you provide a few references to current investors? Please explain the legal structure of the entity that owns the real estate. What reports will you provide, and how often? So that goes back to that communication thing. Do you have any family members or affiliations with the services that the company will be hiring? Explaining the financing structure and terms. Are you signing on the loan? And what will the make ready and renovation process look like? So those are just a handful of questions, but not all of them. So just to get you started and thinking in terms of like the types of questions you want to be asking the sponsorship team.
That was a lot. So it was a non-exhaustive list, but that was pretty exhaustive. But no, that was a great start. Just don't feel like you are in a position where you can't ask anything of the sponsorship team. This is going to be a partner that you're going to have in your life for the next 5 to 10 years, or 3 to 7 years, or whatever the business model is. So nothing is really off the table. If you have a question, don't feel like, oh, that's a stupid question, or, oh, I shouldn't be asking that. That's not true. Absolutely. Even if you know the answer and you're 99% sure, but you want to, the trust but verify, ask them anyway, just to make sure that you're on the same page, and don't assume anything about a business plan. Don't assume anything about, definitely about the returns that are going to be expected. Nothing is off the table. And if you have a question, you should definitely ask it.
Yeah, to that point, the majority of the work as an LP is during this initial phase of vetting the sponsor and the deal. So that's where you really want to be thorough and do your due diligence. After you close on the deal, there's not really much else to do. So, you don't have to continue doing due diligence, like after you've already made that decision and you're already in the deal. Because at that point, the general partnership should be kind of handling everything. So you don't have to worry about all the details and, making any decisions or anything like that. So this is where the work is. It's in the initial vetting of the sponsor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was great. I think this was an absolute excellent, quick episode, but also very valuable. You should go back and listen to it again, just to make sure you caught everything, and definitely use some of these tools the next time you're approached with a deal that a sponsorship team may be looking to raise funds for.
All right. And if you found value in this podcast, please subscribe so you can get the latest episodes. We would love it if you give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. If you know anyone who might resonate with today's podcast, please share the episode with them. And to connect with like-minded investors, join our Facebook group, Honolulu Multifamily and more. If you're interested in connecting with us, go to tricityequity.com to learn more. See you next time.